D&D, first edition AD&D, since I was probably three, I think. Whenever I learned how to read is when I started playing D&D. I'm 28 as of this stream and this video, or wherever it's being watched, because I'm going to export this to YouTube. So I've been playing for about 25 years now. And, well, gosh darn it, it is just my favorite game in the world. It's this blend of playing pretend and doing silly voices and hanging out, and it's this really important part of my life, and it's led into basically every single one of the hobbies that I have. This is everything like from camping to history to mythology to basically anything. And it's real important to me. It's real special to me. And not only Dungeons and Dragons, but just tabletop gaming in general is real important to me. And so I thought I would take some time today and talk about it. A couple people in chat have requested this for probably about 2 weeks now, so I'm just gonna kind of get into it. So this month is D&D's 50th anniversary. It's either this month or at the beginning of next month. I think it's just this month. This game's been around for a long time, and it's been the subject of all kinds of controversy. Everything from stealing people's ideas, like Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, to the whole satanic panic that occurred in the 80s. And since I started playing when I was a little boy, in the early... No, actually, I guess it was in the late 90s, because I would have been 3. I sort of missed out on that kind of stuff, because as I grew up, it became not this, it's evil, blah, blah, blah. It became just a nerdy pastime for people. And there's still some people that believe that it's the game of the devil and it's horrible and it's awful, but they're wrong. So, D&D is a massive thing everywhere, all the time. Everywhere, all at once, starring Michelle Yeoh. And it's about spending time with friends and family, because you get together and you tell this collected story and you do this thing. I just really enjoy it. So I have some talking points over my other monitor here. Not only about DMing the game and how to do that, but also how to do some world building and how to be a good player, in my personal opinion. The best thing about Dungeons and Dragons is that it's subjective. Everything that I say in this stream is 100% my opinion. People can play the game however they want. They can do things however they want. It's not my job to police other people's table to play a tabletop game, whether it's D&D or GURPS, Gamma World, Zweihander, Boot Hill, Traveler, Pathfinder, whatever. Because as far as I'm concerned, the rules that you pick, they're important, but as their guidelines, they aren't inherently the game. So when I say play D&D, I don't just mean like, I don't just mean Dungeons and Dragons, right? I don't just mean first edition, second edition, OSR, whatever. I mean playing a tabletop game is what I mean, because it's synonymous with that for me, um, and I just think that people either take it too seriously or not seriously enough, and there needs to be like a middle ground, because D&D should be something that's fun and not something that stresses you out. So I'm going to take probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'm going to, you can see I got my Google Doc open right here. Google Docs are by far my favorite way to write things because it's everything you get from Microsoft Word, but you can pick it up anywhere, including your phone. And yeah, let's get into it. On my Google Doc here, we're going to we're gonna write a campaign on stream, and the way that in the way that I do it. So, my first talking point. This first section I'm going to call world building. So world building is the basis of any good game, any good D&D game, and that goes into the whole writing aspect as well. And that's actually, you know, I can broaden that and say it's not just D&D or tabletop games. That's good. World building is good for any game, video games, TV and movies. If you can create a at least partway believable world, it will enhance the experience of whatever you're trying to do. Now there's a whole lot of different ways to go about that. Some people give like really just broad strokes, like, you know, this happened at this time, and here's the kingdom, and here's the names of the places, and that's it, and that's totally fine. Some people get a little more detailed, and they develop like, you know, like a brief history of like this and that and the other thing. And other people, myself included, because I'm my father's child, I get incredibly neurotic about it, and I get nitpicky, and I go down into like 10,000 years of history before the game that has nothing to do with the game, but has everything to do with the game because it creates the world that you live in. And that gives you the excuse to have ruins and cultures and just all sorts of things. So it only has to be as deep as you, the DM, would like it to be. If you were the person running the game, it only has to be as deep as you want. You can do broad strokes, you can do nitpicky, you can do this is important, this isn't important. You can come up with myths and lore and all sorts of things. Or you don't do that. You go, all right, we're going to run this dungeon. And this brings me to my second major point, which is the difference between what people think a campaign is and what I think a campaign is. So a lot of people I've noticed over the years have said that a campaign is an adventure that you can finish. In my experience, a campaign is an ongoing world that changes over the years, and there's no real end to it. So, for example, my personal Dungeons and Dragons campaign, I started working on the whole base of the idea when I was 11 years old. And I decided to do this campaign where I set up a world and set up some lore, and it didn't really work out, but I really liked the stuff I had worked on, so I just kept the notes. Well, over the years, I ran more adventures and I ran more campaigns, and I decided to connect all of them because I didn't want to just give up on some of the ideas that I had. And so I created this world. And it is not as extensive as some people's, but it's fairly extensive, and it's got history, and I've got like a global map, and it's a thing. And I have created this world from then. So the current iteration of the campaign, I did 2 years of prep work on, and that was it was a lot. I developed some cultures, I developed some religions, I used real world parallels, and I created this world. And that's just how I do things. Which brings me to my third kind of talking point. When you're creating a campaign world, which is like Dark Sun, Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, it's this big persistent thing. That real world parallels aren't a bad thing. Some people want to create a totally and completely original story, and that's fine. But you can look to history and use that to help you create something. My personal D&D campaign uses a lot of Arthurian mythology because I love the stories of King Arthur and Excalibur and the Knights of the Round Table and stuff, and I use that as a basis. Some of it's real history, and some of it's based in myth, and that's it. That's how I set it up. And it's really just sort of like all come together, like an A-team plan. I love it when it comes together. So, I thought that for this campaign that I'm going to write for this stream, we'd start with how I start with things, and that involves names. Which brings me to another point, that names are good, but you don't want to overdo it. So if you create a campaign world and you just start throwing names at people, they're going to be like, what? Huh? Who? Who's that? Why is that? What is that? And sure, you'll create a bunch of mystery, but it's the same reason that people have a hard time reading Tolkien's Silmarillion. It's because there are a lot of names and a lot of references to people, and it's super hard to keep your names in line, especially if you don't have a head for that sort of thing. And I've met a lot of people who do and a lot of people who don't, mostly people who don't. I myself am sort of in the middle ground where I have a easy time remembering some names and a hard time remembering others. So what I would like to do is let's create the name of the world. The very first thing is just creating the name of the world that people live on. Let's choose something real simple. We'll call it Sol Alon. Sol for sun, Alon because it sounds fantasy-ish. And that's it. That's as easy as it goes. It doesn't need to be super deep. It can have meaning, doesn't need meaning. And that's it. We've created a world. So, and then that brings me to my next point, which will involve this guy, my MS Paint here. You're gonna need maps. You're gonna need a lot of maps. Maps are your friend. Maps are your best friend, but you don't need to be a professional cartographer. Maps are good for references. Maps are good for setting up how things work. I primarily play what people call theater of the mind, which is a playing pretend without miniatures. And the only reference that you get is description and maps. So let's create a little map here. We'll go. We're going to create a singular continent area. And since I am not a professional cartographer, I'm going to give it an irregular shape that doesn't fit with anything like Pangea. We're just going to kind of go. And that is the continent on the planet of Sololon. And that's it. That's all you need. This is our starting point. It's not a super great map. It's not a super detailed map, but it gives you kind of an idea, right? So then you have to work on your legend. And the first thing you need is a compass rose. That way is north. And then we go, this is water. This place is region locked by water. And I'll go ahead and call this something real generic. We'll call it the Icing Sea. So this whole place right here, this entire sea, this is the Icing Sea. Then you need to start adding some geographical bits. You're going to need things like mountains. You're going to need things like rivers. You're going to need things like forests, and swamps and all hills and that sort of thing. So let's say, so I've got this cool little doodad that I hit right here on accident. We'll say that this is an inlet for the Icing Sea, and a river comes down this way and bisects the entire continent. And rivers always run down either into the sea or into lakes. That's a general rule. We'll give it some. It's got some outlets, some branching outlets here, and then we'll go ahead and say that right over here. Because there's this big divot here. Maybe off the Icing Sea, a big glacier came in and hit, right? So something that causes mountains is tectonic shifting. Tectonic shifting, especially on a continent sort of like this, can be caused by glacial drift. So something drifted out of the north and rammed into this continent and started pushing the land up. So we'll go ahead and give ourselves a fjord right here, and then around the fjord with some little mountains. Now, around here in the mountains, that's where the glacier came in. And whoops, that's not what I wanted. And pushed all this land up, but as the glacier came to a halt, it tectonically shifted not only the mountains, but gave us some hills. And the hills sort of popped up over here. So this whole area goes hilly into mountains. Okay, so back to the river. Down along the river, we'll say that maybe off this inlet right here, there's a nice low spot, right? We don't need a topographical map to do that, but over here is a low spot. Maybe there's a couple hills on this side right here that keeps the water in this area, and so that gives us a swamp area. Well, when there's swamps, there are forests, because of the collection of water and greenery. And so down here, because of this low spot and these hills that don't let the inlet come out, you get a little tiny body of water, a marsh or a swamp, and some trees, and that gives you your whole thing. That's it. And then over here, we're going to leave this basically blank. There hasn't been a lot of tectonic shifting. The river doesn't really affect this area. These are all plains, right? So off the coast right here, you get some like wind and rain that comes in off the coast of this area. But for the most part, this section is primarily like a plains area. So you'll get, some hills, things like that. But right through here, this is a nice big plains area right here. So I don't know if any of you know this, but one of the things that people need is water. And people like to drink fresh water. And since even though this river comes off of the sea, which we can assume is probably salt water, it filters as it comes down and gets less salty and less salty. So we'll say that people settled right here. It's a good spot to settle. This is our first kingdom, our first place where people live. And because there's a river that comes off right here with nice salt, not non-salt fresh water, we'll go ahead and give ourselves a big forest right here, which allows these people to build buildings and have lumber. See, there's some more forest right here. And then down over here, we'll go ahead and give ourselves another fjord. Maybe a glacier floated down, got caught in a current, came around and bonked this side. And that'll give us some more mountains. And some more hills. These hills do, in fact, have eyes. And then right here in the middle, we're going to go ahead and give just a big forest. This has no basis, to my knowledge, of any sort of actual geographical location or map planning. I just thought there would be a big forest right here because I think that would look cool. Over here, we'll say there's another low spot, but the water doesn't stagnate very well. It just comes out into a lake. So we got a fairly decently sized lake. Lots of plains over here. A couple forests. And that's it. This is Sololon right here. It's not super big. It's not super small. I haven't given any reference to how far 100 miles is or anything like that. This is all you need to start a campaign. This is it. This could be the basis of anything, right? So most D&D games are humanocentric, meaning that humans are the main focus of the game. That's a general rule in Dungeons and Dragons, because Gary Gygax, in his infinite prose and wisdom, decided that that's how games were, because the people that he played with were in fact human, strangely, and thought that they would be able to role play those characters better. So we'll say that this right here, this section, we'll give it a nice green. This right here, this is a human kingdom. So down here, just to remind myself, this is the humans. And then most elves in games are dendrophiles, which means that they like trees and things like that. But I don't think I want my elves to be stereotypical fantasy elves. So we'll say the elves live in the plains of the Elvish Kingdom. So this section right here, This is all the territory controlled by the elves. And then what if our dwarves live in the hills and the forest? And so right here, this is, whoops, I was going to write dwarvish. This is the dwarves right there. And then we'll say that the halflings live over here in the swamp. Halflings aren't particularly warlike, so they live on this lake on the river, so they can trade with humans and live in the swamp. And they have their own country. And then down here on this section down here, they live in this area. This is the gnomes. Whoops. And this will cover all of our base races that I tend to play with. And the gnomes are a seafaring people, so the gnomes technically claim all of the Icing Sea. So gnomes, in my mind, are particularly long-lived. Not as long-lived as elves, but they're as long-lived as, like maybe 700 years. And so they will be the general trading and catalyst between every single kingdom, right? So that's as easy as it is to draw a map. You literally pick a shape, and use some geographical locations, and that's your map. We have created Sololon. The Icing Sea region locks it. The elves live over here. The humans live over here. The halflings, the gnomes. There's a big valley, big plains. There's some rivers, some mountains. That's the entire thing, man. It's just that simple. So, we know over here that we've got... Here, let me increase the size of that. And go back down. We've got a human kingdom. A halfling territory. A dwarvish kingdom, an elvish kingdom, and a section that we're going to call the Gnome Lands. We'll go ahead and just start giving them names, right? So because we can have real world parallels, we can choose a real world culture to base our people around. So we'll say that the human kingdom, let's base them around the French, right? We'll say the medieval French. There's a lot of history in France, and it goes way back there, right? And it's just unfamiliar to most people that you can have some interesting things while also creating something familiar. So we'll go ahead, and the first French word that springs to mind, we'll call that the human kingdom of Lyon. It gives you the sense of the lions. It tells you that they are sort of French inspired, and that's it. The halfling territory, the halflings in this particular game are going to be based mostly around the halflings. They're hobbits because that's what people immediately think of. So you might as well play into people's preconceived notions of things. And they just call this place the Bailiwick. Bailiwick is another name for a territory or anything like that. And that sums it up. It sounds sort of different and esoteric, and also is the correct word. So, and then the Dwarvish Kingdom. Now, the way that I tend to do dwarf and elf territories is I just call them the Dwarvish and the Elvish Kingdom. The Gnome lands will be the same thing. Now, in their respective cultures, they probably call it something else, but since this game is humanocentric, they refer to it as the Dwarvish Kingdom, the Elvish Kingdom, and the Gnome lands. Since they are fairly kindred with the halflings, they usually just call halfling lands the Bailiwick. And there we go. We've got a campaign world. Everything is all set up. We've got a map. We've got the names of places. And as far as I'm concerned, this campaign, this game, this is ready to go, man. You've got some French inspirations. You can use French mythology. You're using Tolkien hobbits as your halflings because there's your preconceived notion. You're playing into that. People think about what like the dwarves do, and for intents and purposes of this game, we'll say that the dwarves are Norse inspired, and we'll call the elves. The elves are like the Mongols. They're a horse people that live in the valley, or they live in the in the plains, right? In the plains area. And then the gnomes, we'll make the gnomes the English. They live on the sea. Maybe they do some pirating. Maybe they don't. And the English were famous for being sailors. And so because the gnomes live down on the water, that's what they do. They're sailors, and they're based in English mythology and culture and all these real world things will help you develop your world. And that's world building, baby. That's it. It doesn't have to be deep. It's only as deep as you want to make it. So with this basis, you can create thousands of adventures, hundreds of adventures. You can set it up to be something that goes for years and years of the campaign, right? And that's it. We have created a campaign world. That's world building 101. You start with an idea and you go into the nitty gritty as you go down, right? You can't plan thousands and thousands of years of history in one go. It takes time, it takes planning, it takes preparation, but you can give yourself a good basis, and that's it. So, that brings me to the next most important point. So, we're going to be talking about magic. Magic is the most complicated part of Dungeons and Dragons, or any TTRPG. It's outside the realm of physics. It's outside the realm of possibility. It's fucking magic, man. But there are some rules to go by. And there are two primary sets of rules for when you're dealing with magic. You have to decide how much magic there is and what kind of magic there is. So, how much? What kind? So there are 3 amounts of magic for a campaign world. We've got high magic, medium magic, and low magic. So these are super straightforward and deal completely with the amount of magic there is in the world. So low magic is how I tend to play, and it's great. It's super balanced for me. But let's go ahead and we'll start talking about high magic. High magic is Harry Potter. Harry Potter would be considered a high magic game. It would be something that there's fantastical things going on all the time. There's people just casually using magic in their everyday lives. There's people dealing with magical creatures, magical items, all this stuff. And these high magic games can be super fun. People run around with all kinds of magic items. You're having fantastical adventures. You're dimension hopping. You're traveling, blah, blah, blah. You can do that. The problem that I personally have with high magic campaigns is that they're not sustainable. High magic is inherently unstable because there's so much magic going on. And it's like, oh, well, how can we solve our problem? Well, we're going to use magic. Are we going to develop our technology? Probably not. We've got magic. Is our magic going to get built into our technology? Maybe. How's it going to affect history? How's it going to affect war and famine and all these socioeconomic problems that people deal with? High magic games don't tend to have things like that because we're going to solve our problems magically. So this high magic is perfect for a one-shot. It's great for short adventures. It's great for a campaign that has a very clear and defined ending. But if you're going to do something super long-term, high magic is not sustainable because you're passing out magic items, you're fighting dragons, you end up fighting God. It gets banana sandwiches crazy what you're doing in a high magic campaign. And then, so you might then look at, if you want to do something long term, you might look at like a medium magic campaign. Now, a medium magic campaign is something that's more like also boring, yeah. Because when you get to a certain point, you are rolling dice, doing math, and playing pretend. And if it's like, you're going to go into every combat and I'm going to throw fireball, I'm going to throw magic missile, I'm going to put up a wall of force, I'm going to do all these things and just flood the battlefield with magic, then it's like, why would you ever play a martial class? And why do people with swords, why are they still relevant? And how do wizards not run everything? Or maybe they do. Or... and that's where it comes down to what you want to do as a DM. But in my personal experience, they get super boring because how are we going to solve our problems? Well, we're going to do it with magic. Oh, okay. So that might lead you into wanting to do something like a medium magic campaign. So medium magic is a route that a lot of people go. It's exactly what it sounds like. You've got a medium amount of magic in the world. you're dealing with sometimes magical monsters, sometimes you're dealing with enemy wizards, you're dealing with creatures and magic items, and they're not abundant, but they're common. It's like a +1 sword in a medium magic world doesn't mean a lot, but a +3 sword in a medium magic world, well, that might be something. People might have access to permanent magic items on the regular, belts of giant strength, helms of language, comprehend language, magic rings, magic robes, staves, wands, that sort of thing. And people might have, 2 or 3 of these sorts of items on them at any given moment. And it's like, oh, how am I going to combat this guy's magic? Maybe with my magic, maybe with swords, maybe with stealth or something. You'll get, something. Yeah, boots of spider climbing, yeah. And then, medium magic is more like the book series, the Dresden Files. There are very clear and defined rules in the Dresden Files, which is about a wizard who's a private eye in Chicago. And he uses magic to solve his problems, and he deals with magical creatures and things. But there's also an interplay between the regular, normal people and the magical people and the magical side of things. And they can't solve every problem with magic, but magic does come into multitudes of their problems. More often than not, they're dealing with their problems with a mix of magic and wit. And there's always magic involved, but maybe not, he's not throwing lightning and shooting fire out of his eyes and all kinds of stuff. He does that stuff occasionally, but not very often because there's rules and it's taxing and that sort of stuff. So a medium magic world is pretty good for a long-term campaign for most people, especially if you don't have a real tight rein on how you give out magic items. Every single new DM wants to flip open the Dungeon Master's Guide and go, oh, all these magic items are really cool, and I want to give them to the players. And you can very quickly turn your medium magic game into a high magic game because you've oversaturated your players with magic items. And that might not be a problem for you, but for me personally, that's an issue. So you want to, be sparing with those magic items and try to keep a nice balance between people dealing with their problems with magic and people dealing with their problems without magic. Which leads me to my favorite, low magic. Low magic is exactly what it sounds like. There are not very many magical things going on in the magic world. When people talk about low magic, they usually reference Tolkien, and they usually reference, as much as I dislike him, George R.R. Martin and The Song of Ice and Fire, where there is magic in the world, and there are magical things that go on, but it's mostly in the background, and it's mostly a struggle between people and how they would deal with things in real life. Low magic campaigns are, in my opinion, the best and easiest things to run long term. You want people to appreciate magical items, don't give them any. It's as simple as that. They go and they do something heroic or crazy, they fight a dragon or whatever. Sure, give them magic items. But maybe not very many. Maybe it wasn't a very big dragon. Try to keep things balanced. Don't make wizards, or in the case of 5th edition D&D, any arcane, or not arcane, any casting class, like wizards, druids, bards, sorcerers, warlocks, whatever. Don't give them all of the power in the game. and that will keep you low magic. Make it so that they have limitations. Make it so that they do things with their brain and maybe a little bit of magic here on the side. My favorite literary wizard, Gandalf, is a perfect example of low magic. Gandalf doesn't throw fireballs. He doesn't spit lightning. He doesn't call down meteors out of the sky. He doesn't shoot fire out of his hands. He doesn't blast cones of cold or put up walls of force or things like that. But the things that he does are magical. He, being a Maiar, has a bunch of inherent magical abilities because he's not human. And for the most part, he does little small magic. He's got a magic ring that lets him bolster the hearts of people around him. He's got the ability to remember an incredible amount of languages and spells and things like that for opening doors. And at one point, he blesses Butterman's beer in Bree, and he says, "Oh, hey, you helped the hobbits, blessing on your ale for 7 years." And then Butterman later says, "And then the beer was really good for a long time." And that's a perfect example of low magic. It's magical and it's whimsical, and it keeps people kind of guessing as to what can and can't happen. And so for a long-term game, low magic is my personal way to go. You can turn a low magic game into a medium or a high magic game very easily, and back and forth, and fluctuate between what kind of level of magic, but you're going to tend back toward low magic. Which then brings me to the next point, which is what kind of magic. So there are two primary kinds of magic systems. We've got what they call a soft magic system and a hard magic system. They are super, maybe not exactly self-explanatory, but they are decidedly different. So let's talk about soft magic. Soft magic is when there are no particular power levels to things. As much as I dislike J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter is a soft magic system. There is no clear and defined power level. They talk a little bit about oh, he's a strong wizard, oh, she's a strong witch, but it's not like he's memorized 5 spells for the day and they only cast this far and they can only do this thing. He's got these abilities, like Harry has these abilities in magic that can do these crazy things, and they don't really get down to the nitty-gritty of it. Soft magic is hard to do for a D&D campaign. It's really easy to have NPCs do soft magic. It's like, oh, and then the chaplain waves his hand and the candles in the church come alight, right? And he doesn't have to have a spell memorized. You don't have to mark it off a sheet or anything. He just does that because it's soft magic. Now, for players, hard magic is pretty much all they can do. And so hard magic is a complete polar opposite of soft magic. There are hard limitations. There are really specified rules. There's only so much you can do. It obeys a certain rule set. D&D in particular is a really good example of hard magic. Your character can only carry so many spells. Your spells can only do so many things. And you can only do so much with your magic because of the rules. And a lot of people will say, well, hey, it's magic. Why are there rules? Which brings me to a really good point of so you've got your box, right? Inside the box are the rules of the game. It's how everything functions, it's where everything is, and within those rules, inside the box, you can do whatever you want. But the box is what keeps it from being, oh, well, I just, the orc chieftain comes out and I kill him. The box keeps that from happening. Without the box of rules, you're not playing a game, you're playing pretend, doing math, and rolling pieces of plastic. And that's fine for some people. If you want to play something that's purely a narrative and you don't roll dice, go for it. People do that. I've heard about it. I've never done it, but I've seen people talk about it, and I've heard about people doing it. And there are game systems that are really good for that. I don't know any off the top of my head, but I know that there are game systems for that. But when you're dealing with a game like Dungeons and Dragons in particular, and a bunch of other TTRPGs, you have hard limitations for things. You have the box. People have to exist within the realm of the rules, or you're not playing the game. And so hard magic tends to be what you're going to go with for your overall campaign, because the players are the ones doing magic most often. And when you're DMing NPCs, sure, you can give them hard limitations to magic and things like that, so it's more in parallel with the players. But again, you can have people just do things, and because you don't have to mark anything on the sheet, you can have a nice blend. So, in conclusion, for Sololon here, we're going to do a hybrid, which is the best way to do most things. It's a low magic game with touches of medium and high, with a primarily if I can spell, hard magic system, with flares of DM soft magic. So this right here gives you an incredibly broad box to work with, because you're not going to be passing out an incredible amount of magic items. But if the party gets involved with things that get magical and get into those really dangerous areas where you want to reward them with things, they could potentially go from being low magic characters to medium or even high magic characters in a low magic world. In my dad's campaign, which has been running for almost 50 years now, it's the same game. Our characters and the world are low magic. Most people don't use magic to solve their problems. But our characters have been around so long, and we've collected so many magic items, and we've also lost a lot of magic items due to fireballs and lightning bolts and dragons and things like that. But our characters are more medium magic characters running around in a low magic setting because of how we've played as players. We're holding on to those potions to give us that boost. We're holding on to those scrolls to use them at the proper times. We're keeping a hold of magic swords and things like that. Even if we're not using them, it's like, okay, well, this is just a +1 sword, but that +1 could be the difference between hitting a monster and missing a monster, or doing just enough damage to kill an enemy and enough damage to just wound an enemy. Still miss Din's sword of wounding. Like my sister's character had a sword of wounding that we got off of a really powerful monster, and we that monster nearly killed the entire party because it was a medium or high magic type monster fighting low magic setting characters. And so we had to think our way out of the situation and rely on a more powerful character's medium high magic abilities to combat that. Otherwise, we would have had to run. And that's a perfectly viable option, is running. So, keep things hybrid. In my personal opinion, you want things to be as flexible as possible, because you as the DM have to be flexible, and you have to be as flexible as possible. So this right here, this is all we need to run this game. We've got territories, we've got kingdoms, we've got what kind of magic system we're using. We've got we're thinking about how the game is going to be put together, and that's it. We have world built something that is possible to use, that doesn't require a whole lot of thought. You can use it for short term, you can use it for long term. You could develop an entire globe around this particular thing that we've created here, because D&D is part improv, which is great, and also part using the rule set. So that will bring me down into the next section, which is running the game. So it's really hard to teach someone to run a D&D game as a dungeon master. There are so many things that go into it, and there's so much that you need to think about, and everybody does it differently. My dad is the best DM I've ever played with, and I've played with a lot of people, and I really like the way he does things. But when I DM, I don't do things exactly the same way that my dad does, because we're different people and we do things similarly. But that's what makes running the game so personal and so bespoke per person. And you still, the +4 longsword that Din has is really good. And that's a +4 longsword would be considered a high magic item, because if you're holding a +4 sword in first edition AD&D, if you're holding a +4 sword as a first level fighter, that puts you 4 places up on the combat table. You're not fighting as a guy 4 levels higher than yourself. You're fighting as a guy 8 levels higher than yourself, because it's every other level you go up on the combat table. So if you have a THAC0 which is a chance to hit armor class 0, if you have a THAC0 of 20 at first level and you're holding a +4 sword, that brings your THAC0 down to 16, which means you've gone up 4 places on the combat table. So 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. You're fighting like an 8th level fighter with a +4 longsword. So sure, with a longsword you're doing 1 to 8 +4 plus whatever strength bonus. But let's say your character doesn't have a strength bonus, so you've got a +4. So you're doing 1 to 8. So you're doing 4 to 12. So your average is generally going to be 4 to 5 points, which means that with a +4 longsword, you're going to be doing 8 to 9 points of damage on a hit. And if your average person or average monster with 1 hit die, because you're only first level, so you're only fighting a guy with 1 hit die, who's about equal level, only has 8 to 10 hit points. So on average, you're probably going to be able to just run a dude through at first level and do him in. So even though it's just a +4, you've thrown the balance of the game completely off the wall, because you're fighting so much better. You're doing so much more average damage. It becomes high magic at that point, because what am I going to do? Oh, sure, I'm going to hit him like I was going to with my regular longsword, but because I've got the magic sword now, I'm able to hit him through his plate. You know, this guy who is wearing magical plate mail or just regular plate mail. He's less of a threat now because I can hit him more often and do more average damage. So that's another thing to think about when you're doing magic and dishing out magic items. But anyway, running the game is such a bespoke thing per DM that you have to take the ideas of other people and make them your own. So I've got a list of things here, things that I've learned myself and things that my dad taught me and things that I've read online and stuff that I've thought about and whatnot. And so I'm just going to start giving some advice. So for the DM, my advice starts with, unless you're asked, give sparse descriptions of things, because mystery is the best way to give information. You want things to be mysterious. You want things to be not apparent. The players only have as much information as you give them. Sure, they might ask a lot of questions, but you want things to be more or less mysterious, because nothing ruins a magical immersion like, oh, well, you see the thing and it looks exactly like this and it has this many hit points and blah, blah, blah. So you want to be mysterious a little bit. You want to give sparse descriptions. But then that also allows you to reward players asking questions. So when players ask really specific questions, when players ask a lot about, encourages players to participate. Yeah, like our mom asking about every single detail till dad gets exasperated. It allows people to role play. It allows people to get more involved in the story. And it's like, it's like, oh, well, you said he's wearing plate mail. What's his plate mail made out of? Like, you said it looks really nice. And you're like, oh, well, his plate mail is made of steel. And it's like, oh my God, we only have bronze weapons and bronze armor. This guy's got steel armor on. But if they didn't ask that question, they wouldn't know. They just know he's got kind of nice armor on. And it kind of lends an aura of mystery. Maybe he's got a cloak on and the characters didn't see it right off. But if they ask that question, maybe the cloak is shifted to the side and they see his plate mail. And, that allows questions and reward and immersion and that sort of thing. So we'll go ahead and mark that down as be mysterious. My next piece of advice, and this will irritate a lot of DMs that I know, but the monster manual is your friend. You don't need to make custom monsters. When a player asks the best question, the DM's face lights up. Exactly. And that goes back into being mysterious. It's like, oh, you want to know more about this, and that lets the DM who's taken the time to create this world to deal with these things and run the game and referee the game, gives them a chance to show off what they've been working on and give you this world. And so, yeah, you want people to be invested and ask questions. So again, my second point, which again will piss people off, is the monster manual is your friend. You don't need custom monsters. I played with a guy in college and in high school who was dead set that he wasn't going to use the monsters in the monster manual. He was going to create his own thing. They were going to be his own creations. He was going to be involved in every aspect of the game, from the base of the rules to the top of the rules. And his games were tedious. His games were hard to get into because he was trying to juggle all of this stuff and he couldn't focus on the things that made it fun. And not to toot my own horn, but when people played in my game, I used the monsters out of the monster manual. I maybe changed them up slightly to make them a little, it's not just like, oh, well, the kobolds have 5 hit points or whatever. It's like, oh, the we need a +1 sword to fight the whites and blah blah blah. And it's like certain things like you keep fairly consistent, but it's like maybe like the kobolds are famously wearing plate mail, and maybe they use hardcore guerrilla tactics. So it's like what the monster is, and it gives you that thing in the monster manual to look at. Then if somebody has already made monsters, don't use that mind power on them. Use that for your world building. Exactly. That's it exactly. So point 2 is the monster manual is your friend. You want to use it. You want to use your references. You want to use your tools. You want to use the rules of the game that have been written. Because say what you want about modern D&D, say what you want about modern Pathfinder or anything. The people who wrote the game were concerned about balance, and they wanted it to be good, and they want it to be fairly consistent, and so everything tends to be fairly balanced. So you want it to be balanced, which brings me to my third point, and then use all available tools to enrich your game. Exactly. There are so many supplements for D&D 5th edition. There's so many supplements for D&D 1st edition, 2nd, 3rd, Pathfinder. There's so many things that you can use. And there's so much stuff in the D&D community that people post online and talk about. And as long as you're not trying to make money off of it, use other people's ideas, man. As long as it's not copyrighted and you're not trying to sell it as your own thing, use other people's ideas. I steal the names of things from books and video games and TV shows and movies and real world places all the time. I use magic items and magic systems from books and video games and movies and TV shows all the time. I'm not trying to sell my campaign, so it's perfectly fine. This is your own personal table for your own personal enjoyment. You're not trying to make money off of this. So steal things, use ideas. Who cares? It's for fun. You're playing a fucking game, man. And that's it. And again, that brings me to my third point. If you make rule changes, let the players know. If it's pertinent to the players and you make a rule change, make a house rule, let players know. Which also goes into a different point that I have, where it's hold on, let me find it. I can't find it. I'll get to that salient point later. You want the game to be fun and balanced, and you want everybody to be on a fairly level playing field. If your characters don't know certain things, then maybe the rule changes that you've made don't apply to them, but for the most part, they probably do. So this is a super straightforward and simple point. If you're making house rules and you're making adjustments to the rules, tell your players. If it's anything to do with what they're doing, tell them. If you make a rule to like, oh, okay, dragons actually have 3 hearts, and your characters never encounter a dragon, you don't need to tell them that rule, that change, because it's not pertinent. But it's like, oh, hey, torches only burn for an hour in this game. So if you don't bring enough torches, you're going to be in the dark, or you're going to need light spells. Hey, we're doing encumbrance, and I've changed how the rules work for encumbrance a little bit. Hey, you can't, in the case of 5th edition D&D, it's like, hey, you can't infinitely cast cantrips, and here's why, for lore reasons, and here's how I changed that rule. And that's it. It's as simple as that. So if you make rule changes, tell your players. Whoops. And then this one, I'm going to bold this one. And I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm just going to bold and italicize it. Because this is the most important piece of advice I can give to any single dungeon master in all of my nearly 30 years of playing this game, and all of the experience my dad has, and everything. It is absolutely not the DM's job to kill the party. It is the most straightforward and important rule for me, and I think for people in general, the most important piece of advice I can give to anyone running a D&D game or any TTRPG. Because again, like I said at the beginning, when I say D&D, I just mean tabletop game because it's synonymous for me. When you're playing the DM, you're the referee. You're God. You are the creator of the universe. You're the end-all, be-all of the rules of how everything works and runs. So if you want to, you can kill a party. It's not hard. It's super easy to kill a party of players. Everybody's running around at 25th level, right? They are gods unto themselves. They're incredibly powerful. You're running a high magic game. They've got a shitload of magic items. They've got a shitload of spells. They've got all of this stuff. Do I want KFC? Yes, please. They've got all of these things, and you can still kill them in one round of combat because you're the one who decides what they fight, how they fight it, and what kind of adjustments they have. Say you've got a party of 30 25th level guys, and they've all got +5 swords, they've all got +5 armor, and they've all got an infinite number of spells, and they've all got some sort of magical feat or feature or something that lets them go first in combat. First round of combat, you go for initiative, and they're like, but we go first, and it's like, but this thing negates that. Oh, okay, so you roll for initiative, and it's like, well, I rolled, and if we're using first edition AD&D, you roll on a 10-sided die, and the lower number goes first. So it's like, I rolled a 2, and then you roll, and you're behind your DM screen, you go, I rolled a 1, so this thing goes first. And then you go, okay, what are your armor classes? And if it's first edition AD&D, it's -10 is the best, and if it's 5th edition D&D, or a lot of other games, it ascends up to 20, with 20 being the best. Or you can have like above 20 or certain things like that. But so let's say they have the best armor class they can have, and they're like, so this thing needs like, what to hit me? It's like, it just can't roll a 1, and they're like, wow, okay, so this thing can hit like a lot and really hard, and you're like, yeah, and it has an infinite number of attacks. So you pick up your 20-sided dice, you roll them on the table, and you go, okay, well, it hits your character, and then hits your character, and then it hits your character, and you go around the table to all 30 of these 25th level guys, and you go, well, it hits all of you for twice your health, and it kills you on the first round of combat. Now, you're going to piss off your players, but you can do that. So it's not hard to kill the party. I've always felt the DM is more of a guide, like a quest marker type of thing. That makes sense. Yeah, and that I actually have a point about that a little later on. So the hard part of being a DM, and this goes into this right here, and I'm going to unbold this and italicize this. They're going to try to kill themselves. I have had so many people play with me over the years, and one of the hardest things that I have ever had to do is keep a group of very intelligent people from accidentally killing their imaginary characters. People will walk into traps. People will set off magical spells. People will hit themselves with spells. People will do everything possible to kill their fucking character. And it's your job, not necessarily to keep that from happening, but to make sure it doesn't happen every single time that you play. Which leads into game balance, which leads into keeping things in line with the rules and keeping things in line with your rule changes and trying to keep things a balanced set of things, right? You want the game to be fun, you want it to be engaging, you want there to be actual genuine peril, you want there to be actual genuine fights and traps and puzzles and things like that, but you don't want to kill the party all the time, because then why are people going to play with you? Which leads me to my next point. The story happens because of the players. It doesn't happen to the players. And this is something that I in the groups that I've played with, this is something that has brought up a lot of shit with people over the years. People talk about like, oh, and then they derailed my campaign. It's ruined my story. They fucked up my world. And it's like, okay, I can understand. You've put a lot of work into this thing. And you got people who don't take it seriously. You've got people who want to murder hobo. You've got people who want to make the game no fun for you. And that sucks, and it's hard. But the player choices are what drive the game. You're telling a story together. They're the ones pushing things forward. Without the players, you're writing a novel. And playing solo D&D is writing a story. It's writing a novel. And that's fun. You can do that. But when you're playing with other people, you have to take their personal wants and needs into consideration. So, for example, you can have the bad guys in the background doing all kinds of things. But maybe they never interact with the players. You don't need a boss. You don't need a BBEG, which is big bad evil guy. You want the players to decide what's important. A good piece of advice that I got from my friend Dan Fox is if you want people to care for an NPC, you make that NPC mildly interesting, and if the party starts to give a shit about them, they do. And if they don't, you scrap that NPC. That doesn't. That's it. It's as simple as that. You go with what the people that you're playing with are interested in. The story happens to the players. Or not, no, sorry, this is not to. The story happens because of the players, not to the players. You want people to be engaged. You want people to do things that you're interested in as well, but also you have to realize that you're doing the thing for them and they're doing the thing for you, and you have to come together. It's a cooperative thing. If the players aren't playing in a way that you like, talk to them about it. If the players continue to do things that you dislike in your game, talk to them about them. And if it comes down to it, stop playing with those people and look for a different group. And it's as simple as that. Now into a more nitty-gritty sort of piece of advice. And this one I got directly from my dad. We want to keep good track of time, combat rounds, months, days, years, any amount of time in this game is important. You want to know how long a spell lasts. You want to know how long it's been since the party restocked their food, if you want to get that nitty-gritty. You want to know how long they've been adventuring. Keep good track of time. The way that I keep track of time, it looks something like this. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. It looks something like this. I've created my own calendar for my game, and the way that I keep track of time is like it's the 13th day, of the second week of Frostmoot, which is one of the months in the game. And that's the heading that I put down for my thing. The party fought and slew 20 goblins and looted them, and then loot description, and then casualties among the party. And that's it. That's how I keep track of time in my game. That's how I take notes in my game. It's straightforward. It's simple. You can go, oh, well, this day, this happened. You can even get even more specific. Party fought and slew 20 goblins during third watch at night and looted them. They found 25 silver pieces and a couple short swords and a potion, and Gorlock, the destroyer, the barbarian, was killed. That's it. I keep good track of time. That's it. I have pages and pages and pages and pages of notes, because I prefer to write things down with my hand, by hand. Some people prefer to type things out, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever was comfortable for you, do that. But I've got pages of handwritten notes from years, literal, actual, in-game as well as real-life years of gameplay of notes that look exactly like this. And it hasn't failed me so far. Somebody's like, oh, when did that happen? Open the book, flip back, right here. You talked to Shmebulok, the gnome, on the 5th day of the second week of rainfall. Or no, not second week, but the 5th day of the first week of rainfall, you talk to Shmebulok, the gnomish inventor, about this thing. And since it's currently the 13th day of the second week of Frostmoot, that was months ago. And if players don't remember things, you go, hey, make an intelligence check, see if your character remembers that. Boom, make the intelligence check, or whatever mnemonic check you might want to give them. And there you go. Solved right there. That's the whole thing. And that's it. Keep good track of time. That'll help you immensely. Which brings me to my next point of things that will help. The bad guys are just as smart as the party, but never give them omniscience. The bad guys only know as much as they can know. And if you keep good track of time and keep good notes like that, you can know what the bad guys know about the party. In my dad's campaign, we do a lot of fighting against this group of evil druids and evil wizards called the Fifth House, and the Fifth House druids and the Black Hand wizards. But they don't know who we are in general. We may have slipped up here and there, telling the wrong people our names or that sort of thing, but our characters use a lot of stealth, and the bad guys are aware people have been fucking with them, but they don't know who, they don't know why, they don't know where we're coming from, what kind of capabilities we have, or even how many of us there are. And that's great, you know? And the bad guys don't have omniscience. They touching bad things and getting doppelgang, yeah. Which is another thing that happened in Dad's game. But since the bad guys don't have omniscience, they can't be 100% prepared for the things that we might do, which allows my dad, or just the DM in general, to have a more interesting time playing, because you could immediately it would be like LOL time 2 or losing levels while trying to be neighborly. Exactly. My mom's character shook hands with a white because she was trying to be friendly but didn't know it was a white, and it drained her levels. But so like imagine you're playing chess against a grandmaster, and the grandmaster, you move a knight forward, and the grandmaster goes, "Oh, I see you're playing the Bingle Bongle opener. Well, that was phased out 45 years ago with the Schmagelback riposte," and he moves a pawn forward, and he's like, "I'll beat you in 3 moves," and in 3 moves he beats you. That's what it's like when the bad guys have omniscience. There's no point in playing. It's like, oh well, we're gonna go in under the cover of darkness, and we're going to sneak in and open the gate. Oh, okay. Well, I've decided that because I, the DM, know that you're going to slip under the cover of darkness, all the bad guys are going to have continual light flashlights and are going to be looking in every single shadow everywhere. If it makes sense for the story, like the party has been caught before and the bad guys are prepared for it, go for it. But if they're trying to hit an enemy fort and the bad guys have had no contact with them at this point, and they don't know who they are, what's going on, they don't know their capabilities or anything like that, give them a base amount of knowledge, right? The bad guys are going to keep watch. The bad guys are going to set traps for general things. The bad guys are going to use magic that they have that they think would be good in a situation, right? Wizards are going to carry lightning bolts, they're going to carry fireballs and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. But they aren't necessarily going to have a counter for every single thing that the party has, which brings me to a sub point of how much I hate the spell counterspell. In 5th edition D&D, spell counterspell is a 3rd level spell, and if you're carrying it in your head, when somebody throws a spell at you, as a reaction, you can just go and counter that spell. There's a check involved. You have to roll something for it, but you can just boom, and it disables the spell that the person throwing the spell at you was casting. It's general purpose. It's all use. There's no spell it can't counter. It just counterspell. Anything. Somebody's trying to throw a healing spell, counterspell. Somebody's throwing fireball, counterspell. Why would you carry anything else in your head at 3rd level? Don't make every bad guy the toughest guy ever. Everyone has flaws. Exactly. And the look of terror when a dozen magic missiles destroy your shield is perfect. So if things have a counter, make it something that people have to think about. The spell shield will block magic missile, but you have to throw that spell before it happens, before somebody throws magic missile at you. In 5th edition D&D, they added this thing called reactions, which I disagree with, where you can cast a spell as a reaction. Somebody throws magic missile at you, and you throw shield. Now, in a logical real-world sense, okay, that makes sense. You see somebody throwing a spell, and you can go and throw a spell up in front of you to block it. That makes sense. But from a gameplay standpoint, you want to reward people's critical thinking. It's like, I threw shield before we came in here, so I don't need to worry about magic missile for 1 round. I threw Minor Globe of Invulnerability, which blocks, in 1st edition AD&D, blocks spells up to 3rd level. It only lasts so long, and according to the book rules, it doesn't move. So you drop it, and you have a dome shield sort of around you for 10 feet radius, a 10-foot radius, on the center of your person, and it'll block spells, but you have to cast that spell first. An ounce of prevention and all that jazz, exactly. So don't create infinite counters to the party. The bad guys are just as smart, but they're not omniscient. They're going to make preparations, they're going to set traps, they're going to have spells, they're going to have magic items, but you don't make them all powerful, you don't make them omniscient, you don't make them omnipresent, you don't make them omnipotent, you just make them people. You are also role-playing as the dungeon master. And then this brings me to my next point, which is Um, look to simple machines for traps as well as historical parallels. They should follow the same rules as the party, exactly. People constantly want to overcomplicate traps. It's like, oh, well, this trap fires a dart that when it hits you, you fly back 10 feet and fall into a pit that is full of rust monsters that eat your armor, and then they throw fireball on you. And it's like, okay, that's really complicated. Why would you do that? Whereas it's like a simple machine. You hit a tripwire, which trips a pulley, which drops a log on you. That's a real thing that people did. You know, like you see that sort of thing in like Skyrim, where you step on a pressure plate or trip a tripwire and a log comes down and whacks you. That's a real, actual historical parallel. People did that kind of thing. They took something really fucking heavy and they dropped it on someone. Gravity is the great equalizer for pretty much everyone. You can only fall so far before the fall is just going to kill you, most likely. And you don't need your traps to be complicated. You step on a pressure plate, the floor drops out from underneath you. You trip a tripwire, drops a log. You have traps that are run by monsters, right? Like murder holes. Murder holes are something that were used in medieval castles and in other wars as well. Like in World War One, in the trenches, they kept murder holes in places, which are just little tiny holes where you can put a bow if it's medieval, or like the barrel of a rifle or something, and you can kind of see out, and you can put arrows or spill oil, like hot oil or flaming oil, or drop rocks or grenades or whatever through those holes out of the ceiling. You know, it's real simple, and you keep 3 or 4 guys up there with a barrel of arrows and a big boiling cauldron of oil, and the party walks under there, and the bad guys go, "Oh fuck, there's dudes down there," and they pour flaming or boiling oil over the party, and then the party takes a bunch of damage. Like, that's a trap right there. It's simple. Make it simple and let the party fart all over it. Fart is the abbreviation for find and remove traps in first edition D&D, and it makes me happy. So it just needs to be simple. It needs to be straightforward. It needs to be something you can make a ruling on that fast. You can make things more complicated, especially when things come into magic. But in general, most enemies are going to do simple things, easy things, things that are going to fuck somebody up or kill them. Which brings me to my next point, which is that balance makes for really great long-term gameplay, and copious magic items make for good short-term gameplay. I kind of talked about this with the type of magic where long-term gameplay is bogged down by magic, but short-term gameplay is really fun. And that has to do everything with balance, right? So you can have balanced encounters, you can have unbalanced encounters, you can do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. But in general, a balanced encounter is going to run more smoothly and be more fulfilling and fun for everyone. And that's pretty much it. You know, try to make the party have a fighting chance, try to give the bad guys a fighting chance, reward people for making things unbalanced, right? My halfling character made a wish, which is one of the most powerful spells in the game, to get a ring that gives him fire giant strength. That unbalances the fuck out of the game, because I'm constantly, permanently as strong as a fire giant as long as I have that on. And I've been rewarded for that. And I've been rewarded for critically thinking and how to use that giant strength to my advantage. So you want it to be this careful act between like here's what the bad guys know and what they can do. They're not omniscient, and here's what the party's capable of, and reward the critical thinking, and reward people role playing and such. You know, make balance your primary core of your game. Of the hammy. And as far as technical rules go, that's when we get down to the nitty gritty. This is it. This is all of it. Be mysterious. Use your references. Tell people about rule changes. Don't try to kill the party. Make the story happen because of the players, not to them. Keep good track of time. The bad guys are not omniscient, but they are smart. Make your traps simple, and make balance your primary core of the game. And as far as mechanics go, that's all you need to run the game. Read the books. I'll add that too. Whether it's your player's handbook, your Dungeon Master's Guide, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for 5th edition, Unearthed Arcana, whatever. Read the books, look at the rules, decide what kind of rules you like, make changes, but tell the players about them. And make it try to keep fun as the core of your game, which will lead me into my next point, which is do silly voices. It's a real simple thing when you role play, and make sure you role play NPCs. If you want people to roleplay their characters, meet them halfway. You're talking to a dwarf character, and your dwarves are based in Scotland, like everybody, or in Scottish mythology, or in culture, like everybody does, and you know, like, oh hi laddie, welcome to the Dwarvish Kingdom. Do a silly voice. Why not? You're playing a game. The DM should be having just as much fun as the players. Exactly. And remember to try to roleplay the NPCs. Now, you don't want to get into the nitty gritty, except for Dad's dwarves, who are Russian or Norse. You know, you can get too involved in the role playing of NPCs, and that'll bog the game down. You want to keep the game moving. You want to keep the game going. But you don't want to let people stagnate. You know, you want to role play and you be like, oh well, you know, this guy's reacting with like, you know, fear, or he's reacting with you know, empathy, or what, any other number of emotions, and he, you know, you're moving your hands, and he's like, oh God, I'm so sorry, Sir Butt Strangle. I didn't mean to step out and hurt your horse, or, you know, you're rubbing your hands together and you're got that quivering to your voice. What's his sister's cousin's name? Yeah. And so I'll actually get to that point, here in just a second. You can get bogged down by the NPCs, but you want to give like a believable, breathable world. And then, so here's another point. I'm gonna reply to a text real quick, and then I'm gonna take a drink, and then I'm gonna move on to this next point, which is huge for me. Okay, so this point is enormous. And this is something that modern D&D players struggle with, in my experience. Online tabletop RPG shows, Critical Role, Dimension 20, The Adventure Zone, those guys, they're trying to entertain you, and they're not inherently the best way to play the game for everyone. Certain people, they can play the game like that, no problem. But those groups have production value. They have writers. They've got people who sit down and do nothing but do this thing for a living. And that won't necessarily be the best way for you to do it. I like Matt Mercer. He's a cool dude. I like, what's that guy's name? Brennan something or other from Dimension 20. He's also a super cool dude. But the way that they present their games online, I hate. Because it's not how I play the game. You know, I'm not trying to entertain an audience. I'm trying to entertain the people at the table. You know, we're doing things, and it doesn't have to be seamless. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be fun, right? And so online tabletop RPG things are a great way to learn about stuff and get into things and have an entertaining and fun time, and they're fun to watch. But they're not the best way to play the game for most people. So, online TTRPGs aren't inherently the best way to play because they're for audience entertainment. You know, you got people who are professional voice actors. You got people who are professional actors sometimes going in to do these things. And most people aren't like that. You know, I have a background in theater performance because it was something I was interested in. But I've got people at my table who they can barely role play. They couldn't talk their way out of a wet paper bag, but they want to play. And I want them to have a good time, so I meet them part way on that. And so, you know, I want it to be fun for them, and I want it to be fun for me, and I want it to be a good thing. And I want people to come out of their shell and be able to do a silly voice back at me, and I want people to be invested in the story that they're creating alongside me as the referee. And that's that. Online tabletop games are not inherently the best way to play because it's for audience entertainment. And then so this brings me to a different point, which is partly mechanical and partly metagaming. So I've said this a couple times, but you should reward players for critical thinking and role-playing. You don't want to, and I have been guilty of this before, and I don't do it anymore, but I used to. You don't want to make fun of your players for the things that they're thinking. You don't want people to feel stupid for trying to come up with ideas to do things. If they think something through really well and they do something and it comes out really well, reward that. If they make the best laid plans and it still goes to shit, be like, hey man, you did the best you could. You gave it some thought. You really went for it, and maybe they don't succeed, but you're at least giving them a reward in the sense of like, hey, it's cool. You did the best you could. Thank you. I appreciate what you're trying to do. And then you've got like rewarding people for role playing. If people come back at you, like you're role playing the NPCs and they're role playing, and then like they're role playing together, even if it's really bad role playing, like people can't do silly voices, because they're either too self-conscious, they're just bad at doing accents or something like that, or people don't have a real sense of like how their character's supposed to be or what they want to do, and it's just like an insert Mary Sue character, but they're still trying really hard. Reward that. Let people know that you appreciate that. Give them clues to things. Reveal some of the mystery as they're role-playing and asking questions and doing things. Give them the ability to play the game in a way that's fun for them and fun for you. And the way that I do that is I use a concept that I developed called Hero Dice. So I have in my possession these little teeny tiny miniature 6-sided dice. They're blue with like nice like white streaks through them, and I've had them for a really long time, and my parents got them for me when I was a teenager. They're mostly used for rolling fireballs or lightning bolts or anything that requires a lot of d6s at once. Dad's got his card dice, which are his own thing. And I don't tend to use those dice for much. I'm not constantly throwing fireballs, and when I do, I've got other dice that I use and stuff. But I've learned that when people are role-playing and people are doing things well, you can give them one of these little blue dice. Like, this is a hero die. You did some good role-playing. You made me laugh. You told a good joke. Anything you want to reward your players with, you give them this meta tool. And once during the session, if they want to roll that die, they can add or subtract the result to whatever they rolled to benefit them. And that's a wonderful role-playing thing. A lot of people, they hoard dice, and they're only good for one session. They don't care from session to session, but they hoard those dice, and they don't tend to use them, but it's a reward. You know, people like you made a good call. You did some role playing that I appreciated. You're trying really hard. Boom, here's a hero die. And being able to reward players for things makes them want to play more and gives them that little dopamine rush and makes them happy. And, you know, you give them something tangible they can use in the game for things that they were doing in the game. It's not for everyone. I can't see my dad using the hero die mechanic because that's not how his game works. But Dad does other things where he rewards players with lore and with magic items, you know, if they're looking around or they're nice to NPCs or talking to people or asking questions and that kind of stuff. And so he's got his own thing that he does. But since I primarily play with a lot of people my own age who are in their early 20s or mid 20s or late 20s and have grown up playing video games and stuff, you give them a physical, tangible thing that they can use to augment the game in some way. It's like you want to roll an extra 6-sider for damage. Boom, you roll that and you add that to it. Sometimes you're going to roll a 1, but sometimes you won't. You know, it's like you're a hero. You're the protagonist of the story. There you go. And it works with pretty much any system. And so being able to reward your players for critical thinking and role playing leads me into my next my next point. We're getting close to the end of the run of the game section, which is at the end of the session, talk to your players. I used to be in the camp that I'm the DM, what I say goes, how I want to do things is the way we're going to do things, and you either take it or leave it. And now that I'm older, I don't want to do that anymore. I want people to want to come back. I want people to have fun. I want it to be fun for me. I want it to be a shared experience. And so at the end of the session, I want to talk to my players and I want to say, hey, what did you like? What did you enjoy? Was that a good session for you? Did you have a nice time? What sort of things did you like and what sort of things did you not like? How can I improve? And then you tell them how they can improve for you as well. You know, you don't have to be like, well, you role play like shit and I need you to be more committed. You could say something like, you know, I noticed you weren't talking a lot. You know, you could try engaging a little more, maybe asking some more questions. And if one of the other players is talking over you, tell me. And I'll say, hey, Dave, shut the fuck up. I do play with a guy named Dave, but that's just my go-to name. And Dave is actually a wonderful, wonderful player and doesn't talk over people or give people shit. But in this instance, Dave, the not real person, is an asshole and he's talking over Bob. And Bob wants to get his point out. So I go, hey, Dave, Bob's trying to say something. I'm the DM. Shut the fuck up. Dave keeps talking over Bob through the rest of the game. Well, I killed Dave's character. he's been punished for fucking with the other players. It's cooperative. It's fun. You're not trying to dick each other over. You're trying to cooperate and have a good time. It's the nerdiest game in the world and requires friends to play with. So discuss at the Ned at the end of each session. What works for me? What works for you? What would you like to see more of? What makes this more fun for me and more fun for you? And again, what makes this more fun for me? What makes this more fun for you brings me into my final point for the running the game section. And it's that there will be metagaming. People are going to play it like it's a game because it is a game, right? But there's only so much you can do, right? There's only so much you can do without it, as it is a game. You have to know rules. You have to know amounts of things. You have to know how things work. There has to be, I'm invested in the game and I'm role playing, but I also am like, how much damage does a longsword do? You know, what do I roll for that? How many of these things do I get? What is how do, you know, because it is a game and you want it to be fun and interesting, but you also want it to, you know, you that goes back to balance, which I didn't type, but that goes back to balance. Makes for great long-term gameplay. You know, a balance between metagaming and a balance between regular playing is the best way to do stuff. You don't want people to be like, hey, I know that this guy has only got to have 5 hit points left, so I'm going to focus on this other blah, 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 you know? But you also want it to be, you know, what I'm saying here is that, like, metagaming you can't get away from, but you want to try to minimize and control it. It's going to happen. Talk to your players. Make sure they know that, like, if you want to have a lot of metagaming, go for it. I don't care. It's your game. You run it however you want. But if you're trying to keep things balanced and simple, don't allow too much. Don't allow none. Keep a nice balance. And then I've said this. This is a bonus point here at the end. I've said this a couple times. Rules and boundaries are what turn math and plastic into a game and adventure. You have the box. Everything, you can do whatever you want within these rules, within these boundaries. And that's what makes it a game. You don't have any of those rules and boundaries. You're not playing a game, you're playing pretend and doing math. And maybe you want to do it like that. That's cool. Whatever you want to do. But this is why towards the beginning of the section I said that DMing is such a bespoke thing. It's so personal per DM. Everybody does it differently. You have to make it. You can only give so much advice because people are going to do whatever they want. So this for running the game, this is my advice: be mysterious. Use your references. Tell the players about rule changes. It's not your job as a dungeon master to kill the party, because they'll do that by themselves. The story happens because of the players, not to the players, so they drive it forward. Make sure you keep good track of time, and here's my example of how I do it. The bad guys aren't omniscient, but they are smart. Use simple machines for traps, gravity, inclined planes, heavy shit, and look at historical parallels for how people defended castles and forts and things like that. Try to keep things balanced for your game. You know, make it the primary core tenement of your game, and you'll have these more fulfilling, longer sessions and games and campaigns where people have a good time. Become familiar with the rules, which is something I guess people don't do a whole lot. But also, actually, I'll amend this. But also know that the rules are guidelines. Captain Barbosa in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie said it the best. He said that the pirate code is more like guidelines rather than what you call actual rules, and that's how you should view the rules of any tabletop game that you play. I say D&D because that's what I'm most familiar with, and for me it's synonymous with tabletop gaming. But you want to keep the game moving, read the books, know the rules, but also know that the rules are guidelines and you can change them as long as you tell the players about rule changes. Make sure you do silly voices and roleplay the NPCs. Make sure and know that online tabletop games like Critical Role and the Adventure Zone and Dimension 20 are for audience entertainment, not necessarily the best way to play the game for you. Make sure you reward your players. Talk to your players. There's going to be metagame. Try to keep it to a balanced minimum. And the rules and boundaries are what turn math and plastic into a game and adventure. And that concludes my running the game section. That's if you're going to be a DM, this is all of my core tenets all the way down. This is the game that we designed a minute ago, the campaign we wrote a minute ago. Keep your eyes on your magic, keep your eyes on how you run the game, and everything like that. So if you want advice as a DM, this is it. This is all I got for you, because everything else is up to you. You're going to figure out what works for you. You're going to figure out what doesn't work for you. You're going to figure out what's fun. You're going to figure out what's not fun. And remember that it is a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's fun for you. It's fun for the party. You want it to be a good time. And that's running the game. So I got one more section here. And these are my core tenets for playing the game. Now, a lot of people will give you advice on how to be a good dungeon master or a game master, whatever you want to call it, keeper if you're playing Call of Cthulhu. They're going to give you all that kind of advice. But some advice that a lot of people tend to overlook, there are people that talk about it. There's a YouTuber in particular who I watched some of her videos. Her username is Ginny D, Ginny DI baby. I don't know. You'll find her really easily. And she did a really interesting video about how to be a better player and how to be a good player. And I disagreed with her on some points, but at the end of the day, like, she gave some good advice. And I haven't seen a whole lot of other people talk about how to be a better player, because you can have the best DM in the world, but if you yourself are a shitty, disruptive player, you're going to ruin the game for everyone involved. You're going to ruin the game for you. You're going to ruin the game for the guy sitting next to you. You're going to ruin the game for your dungeon master. You're going to fuck it up for everybody. It's a bad time. So, these are my tenets for being a good player. And the first one is the easiest one to remember. Don't be a dick. It's simple as that. Let people role play. Let people do their silly. If you're not doing a silly voice, that's fine. But don't shit on other players for the things that they're doing. Don't shit on the DM for the things they're trying to do. If something is a blatant ripoff of an anime or a book that you've read, that's fine. Let them do it. Who gives a shit, man? You're playing a game. Don't be a dick. There's not a whole lot to say about this one. It's just, don't be a dick. If you're role-playing a character who's sort of contentious, that's okay. I played a character with my current gaming group on Wednesdays where my character was sort of built around the Joker. He was homicidal. He was genocidal. He was automatic. He was greased lightning. He was a guy who wanted to blow things up. He wanted to kill people. He wanted to dismantle the world. But I cooperated with the party. And maybe that doesn't fit all the way in with how my character was. He died recently. But maybe that doesn't fit in with how my character was as a character. But because it's a game, as it says right here, it is a game, I can make that allowance and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to be a dick to the rest of the party because that ruins the flow of the game. So I wasn't a dick. And when you're not being a dick, you need to respect the decisions of the DM. Even if they don't align with the book rules. Yeah, you can still be homicidal and still have friends. I mean, look at the Joker, right? Because that was the character that I modeled my last guy after. Because we're playing a bunch of medieval gang members. And you know he's a bad guy and he extorts people and he kills people but you know I need my party. The Joker cooperates with the Legion of Doom. It wasn't that hard to jump to that. So with that, when you're not being a dick, you need to respect the decisions of the DM, even if they don't align with the book rules. I've had so many players argue with me as a DM, and I have argued with the DM, and all it does is bog the game down, piss people off, and make it harder to play the game. Now, if you take issue with something, bring it up. Hey, I don't agree with that for this reason. Sometimes the DM will go, you know what, actually, you're right. Because if you're a good DM, you'll discuss with your players what you can do better. And you can go, hey, let's, you know, I see what you're saying, and the DM will go, okay, you know what, you're right. And they can retcon and change things because they're the DM, they're the referee, they can do whatever they want. But if they go, you know what, actually, you can't do that. You just go, okay. You move on. That's it. You disagree, that's fine. Move on. A couple weeks ago, actually, when that character I was talking about died, one of the other party members was casting a spell and was trying to use it to do something interesting, and it didn't necessarily work out. And I had an idea for how it was going to work, and I said, hey, you know, do you want an idea for how this could work? And the DM, my friend Dan, said, hey, I'm actually going to put the kibosh on that because, you know, you got to let him play his own character. And I disagreed with that because I think that people should be able to talk at the table because it's a game. But that's not how he wants things run. And I said, oh, okay. And my idea died. I disagreed. I brought up, you know, hey, you know, like, can we do this? And he said no. And I said, okay. And that was it. I wasn't a dick, and I respected his decision as the DM, even if it doesn't align with the book rules or what I think should happen. And because of that, it brings me to my next point. Try. This one's real simple. Put in effort. The person running the game has put in time and effort into the thing that they're doing, that you're doing as a group. Put in effort. Maybe you can't do a silly voice. Maybe you're bad at doing accents. Maybe you can't remember names of people. That's fine. But as long as you're giving effort, you're trying. You showed up. You're like, I am down for this. I'm gonna do stuff. It's gonna be great. I'm here for it. And that leads me into my next thing of trying. This is a subsection of trying. Become invested and ask questions. The only information you get is what the DM gives you. The only way you get information is if you ask questions. You can only become invested if you ask questions, and if you're trying. You have to try to make it fun. You can't expect the DM to lead you by the nose into entertainment and amusement. You have to give effort. It can't just be the DM talking the whole time. Something that bothers me when I play with people is I'm like, okay, what do you guys want to do? And it's dead silent. I timed it one time with a group that I played with. It's dead silent for 10 minutes. They all looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they looked at their stuff, and I took some notes. Got some things ready, drew a little map. 10 minutes. They didn't say anything. The story happens because of the players. It doesn't happen to the players. I'm not going to lead you into everything. You have to try. You have to become invested. You have to think about what your character wants. You have to think about what you want out of the game. You got to ask questions. Well, I don't know. What is there around, Steven? What can we go do? Oh, well, I can give you some information on that. Well, you could go talk to people at the inn for things. You could go talk to the bailiff about maybe there's some people missing, or maybe there's some bounty hunting that you can do. You can. People always want to immediately go talk to the king, and it's like, who the fuck are you? You're first level. You can't. What do you mean you're gonna go talk to the king? You're gonna go into his court and just be like, King Wiggle Waggle, what do you need me to do? And he's going to say, get the fuck out of my courtroom, and that's it. Who are you? I don't give a shit. Go talk to one of my aides, or go talk to one of the lower down nobles, or somebody who deals with the sort of thing. I deal with the matters of the state. You guys, you're some pissant at first level. Fuck off. So become invested, ask questions, and give a shit and try. Which also leads down. So all of this, I guess, is a subsection of try. So let me set this up like this. Go invested, ask questions, do a character voice, and role play. Talk to your party members in character. And build that relationship. Build a relationship in game. Yo, Barkeep Buttchub, what's going on in the Shire? Exactly. A lot of players that I've met are like, well, like, how did our characters meet? It's like, well, you decide. Did you guys meet in an inn? Like, I've done a lot of like, okay, well, let's how you guys meet, because people don't try. People don't become investor, ask questions. People don't give me the information to keep the game running. And they don't build a relationship with their party members. They don't talk in character to each other. And some people are a little shy about it, and that's okay. Maybe you're bad at doing a character voice. Maybe you're bad at acting, but you're talking is like, hey, Sir Gallant the Just walks up to Boblin the Goblin and goes, hey, what did you do growing up? What does your family do? Ask questions. If you've built, or if you've built this relationship, and if you've rolled this character a certain way and come up with this backstory, even at first level, you can come up with like light backstory, like what did your family do? Why are you adventuring? That sort of thing. You can create these in-game relationships, and you can call on those things later in the game, and maybe you'll get some hero dice or some rewards for critical thinking and role playing. And that actually, speaking of putting characters together, that brings me to a point that I've argued with people about for years. And that is, don't build a character. Choose organically. Something that has really increased my enjoyment of playing games, tabletop games in particular, is I don't use the term, I don't build a character. I roll a character. I create a character. Building implies that they are only a game mechanic to me. And that simple phrasing of I am choosing this for my character for role-playing reasons, for lore reasons. Maybe it's not necessarily the best metagame reason, but my character would pick something like that because it's interesting. It's something that has increased my enjoyment and made me a better player in general. And if you've got a good DM who uses balance as a primary core of the game, choosing organically is perfectly viable. You don't have to pick all of the best feats or non-weapon proficiencies, or you don't have to have all the best magic items or spells or anything like that, or best. You can have this character who is organic and put together for fun, not somebody who is just a Mary Sue insert that can carry you to the slaying of the dragon. My next point. This actually goes under try. Now that I think about it, don't take things too personally. It's a game. You're playing a game. If your character happens to shake hands with a wight, maybe it's not personal that you lost a level. It's like, this is something, guy with the highest stats and least characterization dies first, usually. Yeah, exactly, because he doesn't play like a character. He's an extension. He's a Mary Sue insert. He's just he's a game mechanic. The game mechanic goes away first. That middle finger from Mom Rocks, who is my actual mom, is because her character shook hands with a wight. Player knowledge not equal character knowledge. Yeah, and that's a point a little bit further down. But yeah, you don't take things too personally. It's like the DM is the referee and they're not trying to kill you, but if you charge into a group of 400 orcs, the orcs are probably going to hold you down, even if you have magical armor, unless you've got god strength. The orcs are going to dogpile you and hold you down and put a dagger through the slit of your helmet and kill you. You play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? Not that necessarily things that you're doing are stupid. Like, for example, my mom shaking hands with a wight. We were in a place that was Bad News Bears. It was a real Bad News Bears sort of place. And this portal opened and some dudes stepped out. But because of experiences she's had in the past, she knows that it's not always draw steel, kill the bad guy, right? Sometimes things happen that you don't understand or you don't know, and you go, hey, let's talk it out. Now, I can't say I would have done anything differently. My character was unconscious at the time. But in the situation where you've run into groups where you can talk your way out of situations, I can see exactly what led her down that path of, I'm going to shake hands with the wight. Because she didn't know it was a wight, because he was wearing a mask, he was wearing robes. Sure, we were in an evil temple underground, but her character doesn't know anything about how transportation magic works. So maybe we tripped something and some good guys popped out and were like, hey, we've been waiting for somebody to break the seal and let's discuss this and we can help you fight the bad guys. There's no way she could have known as a character or a player what was going to happen. And so she made a call, and it was a bad call, and she got fucked up, and she lost a level. And she's a pretty friendly character to begin with, but it's not personal. My dad was like, she failed her saving throw, she lost one of those levels, and it sucked really bad, and it was a bad time, but it wasn't a punishment for what she was trying to do. And we learned through her experience that when portals open in places like that, you don't talk to them, you fireball first and ask questions later. Oh, and like Foxy Coxy says right here, question everything. Ask questions. Always ask questions. Question everything. This also, this next point will actually go under don't be a dick. So allow yourself the spotlight, but be able to step back and let others have their time. I've seen people suck all of the air out of a room and people can't get a word in edgewise. And part of that is the DM just kind of lets them do whatever they want. And this goes under discuss with your players what you can do better. but you know, if you have to take some responsibility as a player, right? I can't just talk the entire time, even if I've been elected party leader, or people just defer to me as party leader. I can't talk the entire time. I want to get feedback from other people. Otherwise, it's just me playing the game and it's not fun. So allow yourself spotlight, but be able to step back and let other people have their time to shine, to do stuff. And then this will bring me down into another point, which may seem real familiar. There will be metagaming. If I could spell correctly. There will be metagaming. You see that? It's up here. There will be metagaming. And if you're a DM, realize only so much you can do without it, as it is a game. But if you're for the player side of this, there is going to be metagaming. But try to separate your player knowledge from your character knowledge. It's real hard to separate player knowledge from character knowledge. It's real easy to just be like, especially if you're playing multiple characters. This is something that I suffered from for a long time, where I was like, oh, well, I know that. And it's like, you don't know that. Your other character knows that, and they're not involved in this situation. That's something that happens to my mom frequently, because she's playing a bunch of characters at once usually. And it's like, oh, fuck, you're right. I don't, this character Raven doesn't know that, but this character Amelia does know that. Shit, I can't act on that knowledge. And she's usually pretty salty about it, but she doesn't take it personally and, asks questions and becomes invested and tries to play the game and not be a dick. And that's my dad back there laughing about the silly things that I'm saying. But, even though that does happen to her sometimes, she does go, okay, that is... Are you sure Raven doesn't know this? Yeah. She does separate her player knowledge from her character knowledge pretty well. One of the better players to do that sort of thing. My mom is the person that I've played with the most in terms of player-to-player interaction. And so like a lot of how I play the game, I learned directly from watching and playing with my mom. I've played with a bunch of other people over the years. Yeah, no problem, Mom. I've played with like a bunch of other people over the years, and I've taken stuff from them too, but I've primarily learned basically social interaction via role-playing from my mother. And she does it really well. And so all of this right here, this running the game stuff, I learned directly from my dad. This stuff right here, playing the game, I learned directly from my mom. She is a really, really good player and is fun to play with. And it's always a joy to sit and play pretend with my parents. I got my dad DMing, and I've got my mom playing opposite me, and it's always a great time. So all of this is directly from my mother. So some of it's from dad, but most of this is from mom. Which brings me to my last section, actually. Have you seen her copious amounts of notebooks full of notes? Speaking of notes, notes will outlive memories. This is the single most important piece of advice for any player, other than don't be a dick. And this one, again, I'm not going to say, just like this right here, I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to type it in bold and italics. Take notes. Always take notes. If everybody takes notes, if I'm taking my notes, and my mom's taking her notes, and my sister's taking her notes, and my dad's taking his notes, then we get an interesting mix of seeing who thought what was important and how everything comes together. Because what dad thinks is important, what the DM thinks is important. I say dad because he's my usual DM. What my mom thinks is important with the other players, my sisters, my friends, what I as a DM think is important. I don't take my notes because I always lose my notebooks. That is true. Actually, I have a lot of your notebooks because I'm neurotic. You see what people think is important and how things are and how things interact and how things become, right? And you can get this cross reference of seeing, oh, well, I didn't actually say that. It's not in my notes because the DM notes are law. But sometimes the DM goes, oh, I didn't write that down and you did. And then it sparks their memory and they remember, so you took notes. Do you have healing potions? I took notes. They're on my character sheet. Yes, I do. If it's not on your character sheet, you don't have it. That's how it is. And, take notes. People's names, people's names of places, what kind of loot you're picking up, what kind of things your character knows and doesn't know, all sorts of things. Like Zach and my sister said, notes outlive memories. Mom's got copious amounts of notebooks full of notes. You don't have to be a perfect note taker. Just take notes that are pertinent to you. Take notes that you might want to remember later. I am the designated note taker for my Wednesday games. And I can't stress this note, keep track of your experience points per level. Exactly. That too. I am the designated note taker for my Wednesday group because I'm a DM and I'm neurotic and I know I forget things. And I just like taking notes, and it's helped a lot, and it helps the DM as well. The other day, Dan was like, and he was trying to think of somebody's name, and I went flip, Lady Sylvain, and he went, that's it. It's Lady Sylvain, and that was it. It moved the game along. So take notes. Doc, have you ever played Magic? I have tried to play Magic the Gathering, but when people try to explain card game rules to me, my brain immediately becomes ironed out smooth, and it slides off, and I can't remember things. But yeah, so that concludes the playing the game section. And I've got one more little piece here, for everyone. Remember, that's a shared story, and the DM is the referee, not the antagonist. If I could spell. But also remember that it is a game, and you're meant to have fun. And not just the players, but the DM as well. It's a shared story. You're playing together. It requires friends and people to play with. It has to be cooperative. You have to play together. If you don't, you're either writing a novel or you're being a dick. And you don't want to be a dick. And writing a novel is fun, but sometimes you want to play motherfucking Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes you want to play Zweihander. Sometimes you want to play Call of Cthulhu. Sometimes you want to play whatever. D&D is my favorite and most important hobby to me. It has led me into literally every single one of my other hobbies. Everything from camping to maps to history to how technology has developed and worked. It's helped me sharpen my basic math skills. It's helped me with social interaction. It's D&D is this really special thing that I've been doing since I was a little teeny tiny kid. I would sit on people's laps and roll dice and yell "die." Is a story that my parents say that my parents tell, and I want people to enjoy playing it. I hate that there have been so many bad experiences, even with me, before I learned all of these things. I've had bad experiences playing. I've had bad experiences being a DM, and I hate that other people have had those experiences. And I want people to enjoy playing games like this. I want people to enjoy playing tabletop games, and I want people to have fun. and you can do things with D&D that you can't do with any other game. Video games are the biggest the biggest parallel. Is like you can only code so much in a video game. But if you're playing a tabletop game, you can adapt and make rule changes on the fly. You can keep things moving. You can change how things work as long as you tell players about rule changes. You can make this game something way beyond what Gygax and Dave Arneson and all of the other guys who put this thing together back in the 70s. It's a real big open world, and you can create this wonderful thing where you do all sorts of shit and have fun because you're meant to have fun. And it's wonderful and perfect and my favorite game in the world. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that people enjoyed listening to me drone on about my favorite topic because I will literally talk about this for hours and did. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. If there's anybody in chat who has questions about anything, I mean, let me know. Like I can answer questions. And if not, that's okay. I think I got to eat dinner here in just a minute. But yeah, we did a lot in this stream. And feel free to anybody in chat to DM me, not dungeon master me, but send me a direct message about any question. I'll always answer questions. I'll talk about D&D for days, hours, and tabletop gaming and my philosophy on things. And I'm literally a walking encyclopedic resource for how I think things should be, and I totally and completely respect other people's decisions on things, and all I can do is give advice. So if you're in chat and you haven't followed, feel free to follow. I also have a YouTube channel where this is going to be, so if you want to reference it at all, it's going to be on youtube.com/@drvolcano, Dr_Volcano. So I always forget the underscore. Dr_Volcano. And yeah, we built a campaign here, the world of Sololon, with the humans being the French and the halflings being Tolkien hobbits. We drew a map for it. Looks like this. This is all just off the top of my head here. It's this whole thing, and then we talked about how magic works and what you should think about, and how hybrid magic is the best way to do things. And I, here's all of my rules. Well, not rules, but tenets for running the game, in my opinion. And my tenets for playing the game, in my opinion. And yeah, so join me next time for something completely different. This is just something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I just wanted to kind of get it off my chest. I don't expect anything to come of it. I just really like talking about D&D. So join me next time. Thank you very much. And I love you.